$66 million will be announced in the budget on Tuesday night by the Treasurer to invest in widening the runway here at Newcastle Airport to ensure that we can take larger flights here in Newcastle and we can back in the future of the Hunter for the considerable potential that this region has.
Newcastle Airport is already the second international gateway into New South Wales, Australia's most populous state.
8,500 additional visitors, 4,000 additional jobs, $12.7 billion worth of additional economic activity over the next 20 years.
We've already started on the pavement here at Newcastle. We've put $66 million on the table. Now we're putting another $55 million on the table to turn this into an international airport, to build 2 new gates, to bring in planes from overseas. Because we believe in our area. We believe in what we do here. We see a future for here. We have a plan for here.
Astra Aerolab is unique because it's an aerospace precinct that's going to tap in. One, of course, is the already well-established defence industry. This is the best jobs in the world coming to this region, to Williamtown, which means our kids have the opportunities for the best jobs going forward, and that's exciting for everybody.
This place is a place that is going to bring brilliant people together. It will connect ideas in innovation and entrepreneurship. It will engage learning from apprenticeships and trades. This is the opportunity for this region to become the 6th city in this country. You know, this is revolutionary.
The first question that I'm going to put to the panel is, as we look forward to the year 2030 and beyond to 2050, how do you see global megatrends impacting on the way we look at workforce development? Peter, how about we go to you first? Tim, don't make that face.
So one of the global megatrends, I think, is having a fulfilling workplace. Like, people coming to workplace now, it's not just about turning up to earn a salary. People want to actually think they're doing something for the betterment of the world. And so when we developed Astra, we talked about its brand in a bigger context about what it's going to be rather than a logo. So uplifting is the clear brand for Astra, and that's sort of, it's uplifting for individuals, people, companies that go there, but also the nation. Because we know that defence industry people, it's a beautiful vocation. They're very passionate about what they do, and there's very smart people that probably earn a lot more money doing other things, but they choose to work for the defence or defence industries
because of the purpose and the important role in protecting our nation and bringing, you know, global peace. Basically, I think what the big focus is. So that sense of community, not community as in people from Madawi coming in, but a community within that group, I think is very important. And so what we want to do is have that focus. People, I think, demand high quality workplaces now. They want to really make sure that where they work is a pleasant place to be and is part of their lifestyle. It's an extension of their lifestyle. And so Astra has been designed to be a place where you can go out and do something at lunchtime. You can have walk and do exercise with your friends. You feel safe. So it's that higher quality of workplace that I think people are now just. It's a base level. People want that now. You can't have the old school. When we were developing Astra, we went and interviewed about 20 people who were seen as the unicorns of the industry. So basically they were the hard to get, the hard to retain people. And some really telling comments of those people, one of them was, I love my work, the work I do, but I hate my workplace. So that's, you've got to link those up. If we're now really competing with talent and competing globally for the talent of some of the people that were listed say earlier, that's a global competition, that we've got to provide a value proposition that really matches where they want to be. And the other one was lifestyle. Another comment that came through was, I work in the Hunter, I can surf in the morning, I can work on the most sophisticated machines on the planet during the day, and when I come home at night, I can go home to a house I can afford with my family. So that's kind of, the Hunter is in fact our magic sauce. We've got to have our business park right, but locating it in the Hunter is just that extra special little bit. I think it's a real differentiator.
Thanks very much, Peter. I think if anything, what you've highlighted there has probably been even more so exacerbated through COVID and that link to value set and lifestyle. Tim, it would be great to hear your perspective.
I suppose I'll talk a little bit, that's a bit loud, isn't it? A little bit more, I suppose, in a world view. I mean, I think we've all seen on the media clearly what's going on in Ukraine and with Russia and what's happening in terms of China's footprint and its expansion into the region where we are. You know, if you talk geopolitics, we are facing, I suppose, in Western democracies, if I can use that term, a significant adversary in both, not just in a geopolitical sense, but in a military sense and also in an economic sense. And clearly you've seen, even what you've seen in the media, about the step of China, particularly through the South China Sea and into the Pacific. So we as a nation that sit here, it is a very significant challenge to what we do. And you would have seen in the newspapers where, you know, we've got aircraft where we have traditionally provided surveillance, its support and protection of our shipping, now being challenged by the Chinese for things that we've done for decades and decades and decades in areas that they claim. So in a geopolitical sense, we are in quite a different environment than we've been before. And what does that mean? I mean, in context of how do we counter that to some degree? There is a step change in how we operate as a military. Things like the key things that we work on particularly are things such as quantum cyber, stealth, hypersonics, the sort of, if I could put this, I don't want to be a warmonger here, but the winning warfighting technologies that allow us to operate with a level of freedom in the areas where we have traditionally lived. So put all that together, it is a very, very difficult environment and a vastly changing dynamic in terms of what we as a country need to bring to the table.
Thanks, Tim. No doubt more nightmares tonight. Thank you. If we look at the Williamtown Special Activation Precinct, and specifically at the Astra Aerolab as a model where a precinct approach has been adopted, how has our understanding of the future workforce helped shape the precinct offering in the built environment? Tim, we'll go with you first.
Well, as Peter alluded to, I mean, it's certainly, it's a 120 hectare, if you like, aerospace precinct that is going to be world leading in that context. And clearly what we have here at Williamtown or in the Newcastle region is really the air combat capability of the Royal Australian Air Force. So think about the F-35 aircraft, the wedge-tail aircraft we see there, the battle management, what we do as a nation in terms of protection of our nation and if you like, power projection, that exists out there. So it is a natural fit for a lot of the businesses that are key to that, and you will see that over the next 5 to 10 years are attracted clearly to work closely with the customer, read the Royal Australian Air Force, and also come to a built environment, read Astra Aerolab, where there is the provision of everything that is required for the security of what we make, the security of what we are going to build, and the security of what we are going to provide to the Australian Defence Force. So there is a real attraction there, and one example is a project that is that battle management piece that I've just talked about. I mean, it's a very, very significant amount of money, and we're working with the two major primes. So, you know, in the next 5 years, we'll be another 350 to 400 people building what will be a world-leading capability right here in our part of the world. So, you know, the Astra Aerolab is a great adjunct and a great attraction for those businesses. There's no doubt.
Thanks, Tim. Peter, did you have anything to add to that? You talked about some of those great value propositions of the Astra Aerolab.
Yeah, I mean, I won't go over those. What I was going to say though is that I think one of the things we want to do on a precinct basis, we want to make sure that there's all the elements that are required and that people can in the one spot. And particularly, I think relevant to some of the discussions, this conference is about education, and having something there that's got a research component, a TAFE component and a university component is essential. Thinking of that, oh well, you go to university, then you come and you work for the next 50 years or 40 years or whatever it is just so old-fashioned. So what people coming want to know that you can bring people in and the education and micro-credentialing can happen at the location where they work, so it's a smooth transition between that work-learning environment. And it's not just about bringing people in, but it's continuous. I mean, I know in our workplace that people want continuous education. They want to know they're building their skills as they go. They might not necessarily think that it's a job, they're going to get a new job or something happens, but they just want that skill development. So having it all integrated and focused in a precinct type arrangement is going to be essential. And that's, the SAP, we're working closely with New South Wales Government, but also with TAFE and University of Newcastle to make that come alive.
And just to add a little bit more to that, we are working very, very closely with the uni and the TAFE for what we would euphemistically call an aerospace academy, and some of those capabilities that I mentioned before, those higher end issues that are going to be key to the development of the Royal Australian Air Force. We want to pick a couple of those key areas of endeavour to be able to generate those at an academy here that is not only important for the hunter or the nation, but will be important in an international sense. So, and Peter and his team are putting a lot of work together with those two organisations to build what I think will be a world-leading education capability, integrated with the major primes and the Royal Australian Air Force. Sorry.
And the New South Wales Government, I think,
and the government,
is leading in with the SAP process.
Yep.
Yeah. Great pickups, and I think that aspect of integration is so critical, and something that I think Liana said in one of the panels yesterday, that concept of connection, and you just spoke so well to that and what the precinct can bring to that. As we move on to the next question, so we know several sectors in the Hunter are likely to grow and develop as we look towards 2050. These include growth in air, sea and space travel, plus the education and health sectors. How can a precinct-wide approach enable these to truly take flight? I didn't write this, I promise. Peter, why don't we go to you first?
In RAAF language, they've got this thing called a programmatic approach. So that means across their platforms, which are aeroplanes, they've got the same function is performed multiple times. And so that whole integrated programmatic approach is very important. And so making sure there's that broad, multiple industries can have a broader vision and broader skill set development, I think is an important element of that.
Yes, it is, and clearly, there is an integration of everything that, it's not all just one particular project, another particular project and another. They are all a fully integrated capability. So for instance, I mentioned to you a minute ago about that battle management system. So it is essentially everything from space-based capability in terms of what's going on the Earth's surface and in our region. We get from signals communication, communications intelligence, a whole lot of those things are put together to enable us to operate in that environment. Then you see the E-7 aircraft, which are going through a major upgrade to support the F-35 aircraft, the JSF, that are arriving, and the JSF is going through an upgrade to support unmanned deep penetration combat vehicles, so we don't lose aircrew. So it is all a very, very integrated project system or programmatic system, and the majority of those things that I just mentioned are happening out there, and the industry to support that and develop it and deliver it is going to be established here. We're working very, very hard to get this into the Astra Aerolab, that precinct out there.
Some of you might have seen recently the draft master plan that's been released for the Williamtown SAP by New South Wales Government. One of the components within that is talking about a training innovation hub. Just perhaps as a bit of an extension to the previous question, is how do we tackle this innovation space, noting how the likes of the primes probably prefer to act in that space?
You're looking at me?
I'm looking at you, Tim, because I know you know the answer.
No. I think we've been very, very good in this part of the world in terms of the work that Training Services New South Wales has done, as well as RDA Hunter, in what we call a STEM program for young men and women coming out of high school. And this then is a natural follow-on to sort of say, okay, that's great. I don't want to necessarily be educated in a vocational sense at a TAFE that's remote or a university that's remote. How do we then bring that together in a natural flow to get young men and women to the front door of these major industry players in a way that they're well enough educated to at least go to the front door? Sure, there are a lot of intellectual property issues that are managed by those big primes like the Boeings of the world, the Raytheons, the Lockheed Martins, the BAEs. There's a lot of stuff they're not going to share with each other in a competitive sense, but what we're trying to build is a generic aerospace academy that gets young men and women out of high school into a vocational or a degree situation in an aerospace or in an academy that at least gets them a set of skills where they can go to the front door of a Lockheed and say, I've done quite a bit of work in some higher order cyber or AI areas and I've been educated, and they're going to be critical to what you need. And that's really the way we're trying to execute that sort of program.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tim. So last structured question is, off the back of recent announcements about the coal-fired power station and mine closures, this presents an opportunity for the workforce in our region to transition into existing and emerging industries. Do you see logical connections between the skills that will be available in the market and the needs of future tenants within the airport precinct? What innovative steps do you think the primes can take to assist in the development of a future-ready workforce? Peter?
I'll have a go first. I think that transition or broadening, not transition, probably a diversification of our economy is a better way of putting it, because that's a diversified economy is a stronger economy. These mines and power stations often signal a fair way ahead what their plans are because they're big long-run assets. So there's time to put in place things to help people move from one industry to another. And micro-credentialing is just the perfect way. And I think TAFE discussed it yesterday, and so I'd really call them out, and also University of Newcastle. And it gives them an opportunity to not make people think, oh my God, I've got to go back to uni for 4 years and get another degree. They can actually adapt and build on their skills while they're in their current role to a new role. So to answer your question, I think that primes often have bespoke things they want to do, but they want people coming to their front door with a base skill set. So I think it's important that as an industry, not just primes, as an industry, we define what that base skill set is, and that we need the educational institutions to be nimble to fit that. And then we've got to, but I think the other part is from the federal government, we need clarity on where some of these programs are going. So you don't want a large program, say Tim's using the Air 6500, you don't want them to suddenly dump that in our region and say, yeah, well, where are your 400 engineers now? You can't work like that. And so what we need, and one of the missing pieces, I think, is that clarity from federal government to provide, okay, in 5 years' time, we're going to have a program here that's going to require this workforce. And then we can kind of sensibly try and plan it. It's herding cats because there's multiple groups, but at least we can have a good run at it. So I think they're the missing pieces. But it's not a problem, it's an opportunity. Because the federal government has long-run capital plans, and the energy providers or miners have long-run sort of ramp-down plans. So it should be able to work. And that's why things like this are so good, to try and help solve that problem.
Yeah, I agree. Everything Peter said, I agree with. In a practical sense, we're doing a lot of work with, I can't remember their name, but they're the business group out of Western Sydney. They've received a large amount of money from the state government, particularly in terms of micro-credentialing and again transitioning people from those higher tech, maybe the mining industry, whatever, into the defence space. So we're doing a lot of work with them and pegging them to a couple of the key projects. And it's exactly what Peter said. We talk to the Lockheed Martins and the Northrop Grummans of the world, and they go, we're going to win the contract and then they're going to expect to have 350 engineers here in 18 months. It's just not going to happen. So we're trying to sort of tie all of that together with the education organisations, with companies or with I suppose businesses that are ramping down in the region. What is the micro-credentialing that's required, et cetera, to bring that together, and the basic things like housing. I mean, we're dealing with the planning minister of New South Wales to say, if we're going to attract all of these high-end folks to come and keep them here in Newcastle, great, it's a great lifestyle city, but frankly, we're struggling to house people at the moment. So how do we now release land in line with things that are going to happen in terms particularly, we'll have 750 to 1,000 additional vocational and, technicians and degree qualified people supporting these businesses over the next decade here. And you sort of go, where's the housing going to start? So it's multifaceted and multidimensional to try and get this right.
Absolutely. And I think that's where a place-based approach is critical to the success of the industry.